Vaush, for the love of God, can we not be pro-NATO? I don't understand how you're pro-Kurdish and pro-NATO when you're basically arm ISIS. What the fuck are you here for? What? What the fuck are you here for? What? Wait, how are the... What do the Kurds have to do with ISIS? They're anathema. What do you mean? What? Shut up. Fucking weirdos in here, man. But you know what? I am pro-NATO now. I am. I legitimately feel like NATO and its existence really doesn't do anything to materially suppress the cause for socialists worldwide today. And I feel like the insistence on hyper-fixating on NATO from the perspective of a leftist has been a psyop in favor of the Russian government. I really do. I genuinely believe that, and I don't care anymore. All the imperialist action that NATO has taken is something that could have effortlessly been done by other just European or American military actions without the help of NATO. NATO itself doesn't facilitate anything other than protecting countries in Eastern Europe from aggression from Russia. Yeah, 100%. I will take it. Yeah. I don't think NATO does that much at all, really, except for prevent. In this, to my knowledge, right now, what NATO does presently is prevent Russian imperialism. That seems to be the thing it's doing. Just admit you're a social democrat then and quit masking as socialist? So you don't even know. What does socialism have to do with this? You don't even know. You don't know what these terms mean. To you, and this is the psyop, to you, socialism is when things sound anti-American. That's what it is to you. That's why there are so many online leftists who are hand-wringing at opposition to Russia, when Russia is more capitalist and fascist than the United States. By almost every imaginable metric, it is farther from socialism than the U.S. Russia makes the U.S., in comparison, look socialist. This is not a high bar to pass, okay? They managed to fall below it nonetheless. That's not my fault. Acknowledging that doesn't make me an imperialist. It is simply a statement of fact. Seriously, I have yet to see anyone provide for me a convincing argument. What exactly does NATO do that is imperialism? Please let me know. Oh, you know, you've Yugoslav and Libya. Okay, fine. Well, the European powers would have been incentivized to do that either way. The NATO alliance wasn't the thing that allowed that to happen. It was just framed through that. It seems a little odd to frame it that way. Hassan was talking about NATO. This is the level of brain rot I think people are on right now. Hassan was talking about NATO as though NATO invades countries to make them a part of NATO, like it's an occupying force. And his audience is many times larger than mine. So I think a lot of people, that's what they think of. Like, well, what does NATO do? Well, NATO invades countries and bullies them into joining. Well, no, you petition to join NATO. What does that do? The argument I keep running into is that NATO is basically America. Okay. The powers in Europe are aligned with America anyway. If they want to join NATO, they're already in our geopolitical hegemon. If you say, like, spreading the interests of NATO is part of the U.S. geopolitical hegemon, then okay. If they want to be a part of it, that's part of their national sovereignty? I don't understand. The truth is, and again, I would love to hear a convincing argument for this. You know, like, what on earth? Like, what is the issue? I don't understand. I do not understand. I'm not on the anti-NATO train, but being a part of NATO does require a country to have a market economy. There's no alternative in the world right now. Like, okay, that's like, well, in order to be a part of this geopolitical hegemon, like, you need to have the thing every country has, and no country is even close to not having. Well, yeah, of course, right? Like, yeah, the USSR had a market economy. I mean, yeah. There's no alternative to that, you know, at all. So the Warsaw Pact was okay because the countries were aligned with the USSR anyway. The concept of countries choosing to enter a defensive alliance with the Soviet Union to protect themselves against invasion is great. Did the countries in the Warsaw Pact all choose? Hey, are you familiar with your history? Are you familiar with the history of the term tanky? When the USSR had to roll in military forces to force countries to stay part of their hegemon. See, to my knowledge, we have not recently invaded France, though we should, to convince them to stay with us. In fact, the UK had their Brexit. They left the EU, and they were allowed to. It was a stupid decision. I disagree with it. I think it was dumb, but they were allowed to. But yeah, if it was the countries of Eastern Europe and they autonomously made the choice to join up with the USSR and what have you, this is the reason why. And this is the reason why so many leftists online are pro-imperialism, as long as it's not being done by the US, okay? They need to downplay imperialism when it's done by their side, so they overstate imperialism when it's being done by the West. For instance, they claim that 2014 in Ukraine, the ousting of their leader was some kind of pro-Western coup. They talk about it like it was a pro-Western Nazi coup, like we literally installed a government. Now, this is objectively, factually not the case. It's very plain to see this is objectively not the case. We had a guy on who tried to defend that point, and it went really, 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 really poorly for him. No one will ever be able to defend that point in a straight-up conversation. It's not possible to, because it's not true. But they have to pretend that's the case because they want us to be the monsters that they justify and defend. We need to be that bad in order for their propaganda on their side to work. Now, hey, listen, if you care about American imperialism, if you think American imperialism is so bad, why not talk about the times that it actually happens instead of making shit up, right? Like, why not focus on the stuff we actually do? Our support of Saudi Arabia and Israel are monstrous and indefensible. Frankly, the fact that we are so buddy-buddy with China in spite of all the shit they do is also pretty suspect. But they wouldn't agree with that, right? All the shit we've done in Latin America, all the shit we've done in Central America, all the shit that we've done, our unwillingness to engage in proper, economic, non-conditional investment in Africa, the fact that we still back the IMF and the World Bank and let them ruin developing countries so they're amenable to American business interests. If you care about American imperialism, which you should, why not talk about the things that we actually do instead of defending Russia by making shit up about NATO? NATO was not none of the stuff I just listed was NATO at all. NATO was not the metric through which this should, none of America doesn't need NATO to do any of this, and frankly, neither does Europe. The only people who care about NATO are people who border Russia, because Russia is an imperialist power. You all understand? This doesn't mean NATO is good. It just means it's not a big fucking deal. NATO forces European countries to go along with all that. Is there any evidence of that? Any evidence at all? What? What? Any? Anyway. Whatever criticisms people are to make of NATO, I just feel like it's vastly overstated. What's some very minor imperialist, it would be like anytime anything around the world happened, like somebody tried to draw it back to like Teddy Roosevelt creating the Panama Canal, which was an imperialist action that we engaged in, and we did a lot of really bad shit down there. But and they always bring it back to that, You guys should remember this strategy because it relates to how these people often talk about Assad and the chemical weapons he used. Remember how Jimmy Dore types will bring literally everything back to this person is a shill because they believe the overwhelming evidence that Assad used chemical weapons on his people? Remember that? There are people for whom that is like the crux issue. Now, Nazis have one of these too. It's the Holocaust. For them, any group that doesn't support any group that acknowledges the existence of the Holocaust is to them a group which has been compromised by Jewish interests, so they can just go about ignoring it. You understand? In this respect, they find excuses to ignore reality by delegitimizing any sources of information that run contrary to their pre-existing fake narrative. They're not that dumb? Oh no, they are. A lot of the lefties online that are defending Russia right now are ideologically indistinguishable from Nazis. 100%. Ideologically indistinguishable. They are 100% in line with that. There is no difference. The ideology is point to point. The only meaningful difference is they just have a different set of political. It's just a different history, you know. It's the two identical groups with just, you know, different sets of iconography, images, dogma, what have you, but otherwise the same. And we should be aware of this. I am going to be unapologetic in the future about all of this, because at the very least, you know, in terms of what NATO is doing right now, the only thing it's doing in any meaningful sense is preventing Russian imperialism, which, as far as I'm concerned, at least in the context of Russia's behavior, makes NATO an anti-imperialist organization. If people don't like that, then I don't understand how they can't acknowledge that Russia is the greatest evil in this situation. There's no getting around this. Is NATO a benign hegemon to you? NATO doesn't matter. The hegemon exists either way. The only people who benefit from NATO are the people on the Eastern Front who would otherwise have been attacked by Russia by now. The hegemon would exist either way. NATO isn't the hegemon. It's just a defensive pact. Why do people talk about NATO like it's an autonomous political institution with its own geopolitical bloc? I don't understand this. Why? It's not. It's obviously not. It's a defensive alliance that just happens to correspond with the actual geopolitical hegemon, which is Europe and America, or at least Western Europe and America. Whatever. So wait, is NATO good or bad? NATO is irrelevant in most contexts outside of the one very relevant context that it is currently serving, which is preventing Russian imperialism. So in that respect, right now, I simply cannot hold it in my heart to care that much. You are just wrong. The tear-stained rebuttals of people with no argument. Thank you. Lefties are so obsessed with aesthetics and optics and imagery that they will defend all of the worst things and attack things that honestly at this moment deserve defense, as long as it aligns with their lay epic Yushanka wearing Soviet Union anthem ear rape bass boosted Stalin memes. You are not leftists, okay?